Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Tuesday, September 8th, 2020, 9:36 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means it's a cartography slash world building day. And I know we haven't done any cartography stuff for a while. And today is no exception. Because something popped out at me on the old... where are we at? Here we go. Let's do that. Something popped out at me in the DMG when I was digging through... Because, you know, saw this discussion recently. Somebody doesn't have an extra water with them. What a knuckles. Might not be a long show. I might get thirsty. Anyway, what popped out at me was something that was part of a larger section, and I'll just talk about it piecemeal. Monsters and organization. So this is largely a section about how monsters will organize in your setting. It doesn't. Some of it ventures into a campaign discussion, but that's more specifically how you would use them to interact with a specific group of player characters. This is something that is meant to be thought about as how it will be innate in your setting and then be there as prep work for whenever you run a campaign and the PCs run into situations where this is applicable. So let's discuss this, because this is probably going to be... This might be a couple sessions, but let's start with, or a couple shows, but let's start with the first one. As has been stressed herein, you will find it necessary to assume the various roles and persona of all creatures not represented by players. This can be particularly difficult in combat situations. You must be able to quickly determine what the monsters involved will do in any given situation, and this can be particularly difficult in combat situations. Little repetition there, but perhaps that drives the point home. It is necessary that you make a rule to decide what course of action the monsters will follow before the party states what they are going to do. This can be noted on the area key or jotted down on paper. Having such notes will save you from larger arguments. It is simply a matter to show your disgruntled players these orders. When they express dissatisfaction with the results of such an encounter, the intelligence and wisdom of concerned monsters are principal determinants of their actions and or reactions. Consider also cunning and instinct. It is important to remember that lawful indicates an organized and ordered approach, while chaotic means a tendency toward random, individual action and disorganization. But these modifiers must also be judged in the light of monsters' concerns, of course. Now it gets into some examples, but see, this is the campaign-y part of it, right? Because this is what happens in specific situations. What we want to do for this particular show is fast forward past all the individual encounter situations, which are rubber to the road sort of things, right? We do want to talk about the in-between stuff, The fortress will most likely have replaced all losses and have reinforcements. In addition, an ambush might be laid for attackers. So this is a way of dealing with what happens in the aftermath. As a DM, you must base actions and responses upon what the logical activities possible to the monsters encountered would be when attacked first and then later. You assume the part of the creatures involved and act accordingly. If the attacking party does not have the savoir faire to assess and properly handle the encounter, and this could well mean leaving as quickly as possible and not returning to get a second bloody nose, then they deserve whatever befalls them. It is absolutely necessary that the Dungeon Master remember that a seriously threatened person will reply with the strongest possible attack defense measure in order to assure his or her well-being. This could, of course, indicate a feigned surrender, pretended friendliness, fighting to the death, or dozens of other reactions according to the circumstances and intelligence/wisdom of the individual involved. The best course might actually be running away, something which intelligent creatures and many not so intelligent animals will be prone to do when there is no other choice save useless death. So, then, does a threatened cleric cast a no alignment spell upon an aggressor or a whole person? Obviously, the latter choice is far more logical in 99% of the cases, and so you should have monsters behave. Skeletons and zombies will mindlessly be slaughtered. Giant ants will march to destruction in behalf of their colony. But more intelligent creatures will react with a greater variety of defenses, counterattacks, and so on in order to assure their safety. Morning, Luxfire. How you doing? And the world building advice that should come out of that section is take a look at the areas of your world that you've developed and make some notes in there as to how they will react in likely scenarios. So if you have a band of orcs who have a tribal village up in the mountains in a particular location, and you've detailed it out at least as far as how many are warriors, females, kids, what is the number of buildings, do they have a shaman, do they have any additional creatures like maybe an ogre who they've got an uneasy alliance with, who they keep fed and he helps protect the village, various other things like that. You want to also delineate some of the defenses they might have, as far as, do they have a stockade fence? Have they dug a ditch outside of that? Have they put spikes in the ditch? How many will be on guard patrol within this perimeter at any given time of day? More so at night, less at night? Do they light up torches? Do they have bonfires outside of the fence or near the walls? Do they send out scouting patrols to keep the area free of wandering creatures, as well as annoying adventuring parties? Where is their plan? I found the detail in the Monstrous Compendium helpful. They included ecology, combat, habitat, society, and backgrounds. Very true. If, and certainly regardless of what rule set you're using, if you can pick up a second edition, right, Monstrous Compendium, there are whole chunks of information in there that will help you flesh out a lot of that and determine in advance how they will act. Now, what I wanted to get into specifically today was the use of non-human troops. This is the header, subheader that it is under in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 105, I want to say. And it comes under a whole section on setting up those types of situations and then introducing these. Well, how do these then affect those various examples that we kind of glossed over, but which were examples of things we just discussed? Demi-human troops are unlikely to serve a human master who is not otherwise supporting a cause of the particular race. Some small number might serve with a henchman of their own race, but not large bodies except for short periods of time, most probably when danger threatens their area. You might allow exceptions to this as they become compatible with your campaign. Similarly, half-elves might enlist bodies of elves, halflings might enlist dwarves or elves, etc. Lizardmen will serve a human master only because of fear or religious awe. Either case requires continual maintenance in order to keep the lizardmen serving. Communications will probably be a problem. Lizardmen troops will also tend to fall upon dead and wounded of either side and devour them if not strictly officered at all times. So if they don't have a good, strong hierarchy of leadership that will keep them from falling to ravenous behavior, they suggest that lizard people troops will just fall to manging. Non-human troops, bugbears, and humanoids will be very difficult to handle. They will tend to fight amongst each other. Compatibility of non-human troops, which is what we're getting to shortly. Fight with humans nearby, whether friendly or not, 25% chance if friendly. Run from battle if they see troops on their own side retiring or retreating. And fall to looting at the first opportunity. Communications are also a great problem. If the master is strong and powerful and gives them cause to fear disobedience, it will be of some help in disciplining such troops. Likewise, if there are strong leaders within each body of the troops, threatening and driving them on, they will be more likely to obey. Weakness in leadership or lack of officering will certainly cause these troops to become unruly and impossible to control. Probability of control for each type of troop is shown below. Let's look at the troop types they're discussing here. Bugbears, gnolls, goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, lizardmen, and orcs. So these are percentages based on weak leader, strong leader, officers, and strong leaders. Just a quick look at that. Right? See a bit of fluctuation. Hobgoblins want leadership, but are very strong if you have it. We could get into the various alignments here, but hobgoblins are notoriously lawful. Whenever orders are given or combat takes place, find the appropriate column and roll thereon. If the dice score exceeds the percentage shown, the troops disobey in some manner, refuse to move, attack any disliked creatures nearby, loot, run away, etc. Note that it is not possible to have a weak leader and effective officers. Strong leaders will be tested often. Granting the troops a high rate of pay is generally viewed as weakness in a leader. Compatibility of non-human troops. And here's what I generally want to look at because this translates, in my opinion, to world building as well. So this is really various non-human races being described and how they will get along when forced to work together in military situations. But you can extend this out to where will they live and how close will they live to other non-human tribal races. So compatibility. The general compatibility of demi-human troops types can be determined by consulting the player's racial preference guide. This is how the elves deal with dwarves and hobbits and so on and so forth. In regard to non-human troops, the lizard men are hated by all demi-human races and humanoids save kobolds, and even the latter are suspicious of them, just as human troops are. Of the various races of humanoids, many will bully or attack one another as indicated on the table below. So here is that humanoid racial preferences table based on basic acceptability of racial types. Let's look at what each of the letters stand for first, and then we'll get into the table. P indicates some preference or compatibility and even possible friendliness between them with appropriate cooperation. G indicates that some goodwill exists, and so no hostility and some cooperation is possible. T indicates the races can tolerate each other, and open hostilities are not likely to be evident. N indicates neutral, negative feelings on the part of these races, and that there will be no move to aid them if anything ill befalls them. A indicates antipathy and an active dislike which will break into open hostility if the opportunity presents itself. If leaders or overseers are weak, these creatures will desert. H indicates hatred, possibly kept in check by fear, which will certainly break into open hostilities if at the first opportunity, or else the hating humanoids will desert at the first chance if near a strong body of such hated creatures. Use the table whenever humanoid troops are fighting or even serving side by side within 12 inches of each other, that is to say 120 feet or 120 yards outdoors, if that's the way you're measuring things, of each without any intervening or screens so that the other humanoids are visible. Have the troops behave according to the letter key. All right. So we've got preference, goodwill, tolerant, neutral/negative, antipathy, and hatred. That is the scale. And we look at bugbears, gnolls, goblins. They threw in hill giants, which weren't mentioned above, hobgoblins, kobolds, ogres are here, orcs, and trolls are here. So we've got several of the larger creatures that are giant types, right? But not the man-size or medium-sized humanoid as some of the rest of these are. So let's look. Bugbears with bugbears. Preference. Notice that P running down diagonally, except when it comes to hobgoblins, we get hatred. Double asterisk assumes that the others of this race are of a rival tribe or family group. So when it comes to hobgoblins, these lawful guys are one of the few that actively hate other groups of hobgoblins. So good luck getting an army together of hobgoblins with a bunch of different tribes. Kobolds, P. Hatred, also orcs with orcs, as we're going down diagonally and seeing orcs in the second to last column and second to last row. Neutral negative trolls. Trolls just generally irascible with one another or uncaring. But that's about the only place we see preferences. Notice nowhere else on this chart are you going to see the P anywhere. What about goodwill existing? Bugbears and goblins. Gnolls with ogres. Alright. Goblins with bugbears, as we... right. Yep. With bugbears and with kobolds, apparently. Hill giants with bugbears, gnolls, and ogres. Hobgoblins. Nowhere is there goodwill in evidence. As we said, kobolds with goblins. Ogres with hill giants. That's an interesting one. Many will recall that the setting in the hill giant adventure from back in the day included having a fair number of ogres on the premises. You can only keep so many hill giants in one location. Having a bunch of strong arm ogres around to help mop up any attackers or to deal with heavy labor is a useful thing for hill giants. Orcs, again with ogres. Now, notice this doesn't go both ways. Right? Orcs feel goodwill toward ogres. Ogres, on the other hand, merely tolerate orcs. Indicates that race will bully and harass such humanoids. So, ogres will push around orcs and such. But perhaps orcs feel goodwill toward ogres because there is the chance that they will be protected by such a bully in certain situations, and so find them useful to have around. And obviously, orcs aren't going to push around ogres, generally speaking. They're just not capable of doing so, given the disparity in their sizes. Let's see. Trolls. Antipathy. Neutral negative. Antipathy. Tolerate hill giants. Interesting. Hatred toward hobgoblins. Tolerate kobolds. Neutral negative toward ogres. Antipathy toward orcs. And neutral negative toward other trolls. So, rival tribes, rival family groups. It's probably good in your campaign world when you're setting these various things up to take a look at this table if you want to accept this as kind of a pattern for your campaign setting, which is not bad. If you don't, you might want to create something like this and make some adjustments to it for yourself, because it's essentially a template for when these types of creatures run into one another, but it is also a template for how close will they live near one another and tolerate one another, or if they hate one another, how close will two rival hobgoblin clans live near each other before one, because of their hatred of one another, feels compelled to wipe the other out, and then you only have one. So at some point, you need to create a sort of a status quo of the setting wherein these things are far enough apart that they aren't constantly at loggerheads. Now, granted, there's going to be some situations where there's going to be some migratory activity. Hobgoblin troop living up in the mountains experiences an earthquake nearby that causes a bunch of landslides, requires them to shift where they live to another location, which may bring them into conflict with a rival hobgoblin band. At that point, you have to make some decisions about whether or not one will envelop the other, one will destroy to a person the other, whether they will just drive them off rather than themselves experience such great losses that it harms themselves. And certainly it's possible that depending on the size of each one, that it'll be obvious that one could easily take the other one over with limited bloodshed and incorporate them into their tribes. They may have to kill off leadership to bring the rest into line, but certainly you could have a final result of there being one much larger hobgoblin tribe now living in an area because one had moved into the area and was much larger and took them over. Or smaller, comes into an area where a larger one exists and just become refugees. They become like a lower caste within that existing society there. Sure, we'll take you in, but you're doing all the crap work. We need you to help do the mining that we're doing over here. No, you can't carry weapons. We don't want to risk you taking over our tribe, so on and so forth. So, lots to consider there. Lots to take into consideration and also to decide how you're going to incorporate it. Tell you what, we're near the time, so I'm just going to say thank you to everybody who follows the channel. Thanks. Oops, what did I do? Uh-oh. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we'll say thanks there. You know, I never wore my headset the whole day. It looks like the meters are showing that everything's running fine. Hey, there's our Dennis 8242. Welcome. Good to see you, Sarah. And just going to say thanks also. Oh, the schedule. What's going on tomorrow? Campaign discussion? You know, maybe we'll go back to this section and read through those examples so that that kind of ties it back into today. That probably would not be a bad thing. And GMing tips on Thursday. Boy, that can fit in there too. So much of this stuff is so close to the line. It's very little delineation between how some of this material applies in one case and then in another. Anyway, building adventures on Friday, GMing reviews on Saturday, rules retrospective on Sunday, Monday, weekly news and announcements, then back around to cartography and world building next Tuesday. I want to thank everybody for following and also jumping in, checking things out. If you're on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. Give us the thumbs up. Maybe make a comment if you have some constructive criticism to share. It's always appreciated. And I think I got everybody on the list for next week. So thank you very much. Once again, it's kind of a grubby day here in Lake Geneva, but we've had worse. Not so bad. Thank you very much and have a great day. We'll see you 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, the next day, the day after that. Every day probably for the rest of my sick and twisted existence. Just kidding. Love you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.